No. Good. Okay. Started. It is here today. Welcome to everyone that came to join us. We will first have a prayer or thought offered by Councilmember Bowers, and then we'll have a pledge of allegiance.
Committee together. Council, good for the city. And our strengths. Please help us to apply peace and safety, and bless that we will have health and strength as we move forward this week. I say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. First have our consent agenda and minutes from our last meeting, June 28th. If the council's had time to review that and take a motion.
This is our last meeting. All right, gentlemen, got it.
Councilmember Ewald and Councilmember Grover. Any conflicts of interest tonight?
Public comment. So this is the time if any of the public wants to comment, we'll give you 3 minutes and let you speak to us. Yeah.
Just a quick thing. I
Tell us your name because we know who you are.
Trey Herring. I had sent David some information about it. I've got a company coming on July 20th to Blue Mountain Hospital that focuses on cellular bandwidth for emergency responders, law enforcement, EMS, fire department, etc. What that means is emergency responders within the county or the surrounding area, or really wherever a tower exists, have their own band compared to being on the same cellular tower as the rest of the community. This comes all the way back from 9/11. Anyway, we'll have representatives of Blue Mountain Hospital from 11:30 to 4 on July 20th. We would like to speak to them to kind of see what they have to offer. I've kind of looked at it myself. I did AT&T versus Verizon, which is fine for me. I had AT&T before, but from a cost perspective and having the separate towers for emergency responders, we've got one on Zuma Creek, Mexican Hat, Monticello, and really all over the nation. But just an offering that they kind of want to meet with everybody who would be interested in that.
If I can add to that, so one of the things is if, say, all the cell towers in the area go down, those are the first ones to go up. Well, first responders, that's part of that.
Yeah.
So,
And they can explain it much better than I can.
Yeah.
okay, good to know. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to us? All right. We will move to our reports. We'll have anything specific to report, but I think that was just council have anything they want to report on.
I'll just comment that Terry and I met with the Transportation Board last night, and we'll talk about that further when we get to it on the further down in the list.
Okay.
You and who?
Terry.
Oh,
Okay, anybody else from council have anything to report? City manager report, David Johnson.
I only have one thing outside of what's in the project status report, and that's, we put together the applications for both the recreation board. We have some openings for recreation board as well as the airport, or I should say, recreation committee, as well as the airport advisory committee. So in the next couple of days, I'll work with Pratt to get those applications out so that we can consider those and bring them to the council for recommendations. There's 4 right now, yeah. We have a couple that are overdue and a couple that are coming up to expire.
These are the online applications through the city
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, exactly. Who they are they a resident, what's their interest.
Well, we have hard copy for if anybody wants to come into the office and fill it out. Yeah. I mean, I don't anticipate it being a huge need, but if there's a need, cover it. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Financial report, Kim.
The financial report, the accounts payable is in the packet. You have some questions on any of those items. I tried to outline some of the things I got from Ally. So you have to answer any questions you may have.
The Clear Gov program, how are you liking that so far?
I really like it. We're in the process of setting up training for the other components of that. Hopefully get that started next month, once we get through some vacations and some audit. And then get that those other components to it, the capital budgeting, including the personnel budgeting, and the everything more. I think we'll really like it once we get that up and.
And we'll add a little more info on the public input on the website.
Yes,
So we're just kind of wording it right now a little more, so. On some great topic.
is that, we're doing that voluntarily, right? Does it meet state laws? Is there state laws that cover that?
What it does
Or
is, no,
transparency?
no, but that we should be transparent. There's no law that says you have to be transparent, but it's really important that you are. And so it does meet all of those requirements. It makes it easier for the public to sort through and see what is, what the budget is and how things are going and trying to go through the state transparency,
Right.
side, which, as you know, is, we got
That's
around all.
impossible. So this, for now, it's just voluntary.
Yes.
Just voluntary. I'm glad we're doing that.
And how often do we pay? Is it yearly?
It's a yearly payment, and then once a quarter, then my schedule is to upload an update to it so that everything will update quarterly. The expenses and stuff will change that way so that the public will see how we're working our way through that budget.
Kim, do we have a year-to-date on how much we paid in attorney fees?
Well, you're talking January.
Are you
so
talking
it's
January to
January to now, attorney fees.
It's
30,000, right around there? I just saw that number this morning.
Yeah, it's around 30,000, so,
If you'd like an exact number, I can pull it and send it out in an email, but that report should give it to you, because we have to go back and. recheck
Well,
some
I mean, I can see what it says in the total there.
so,
Is that the grand total? Can't be, because this one was the 10,000.
Okay, no, it doesn't.
no,
It's
So-
no, you're right.
so in last week's packet, I showed about 21, and this week's about 10.
Because this is just
So one of the issues that we have with our attorney, who I'm glad you asked that, because I meant to mention that in my reports, was that they were not getting us their invoices till, basically they didn't start getting us invoices till May. And then when I got their invoices, we found, particularly with the prosecution side, they're spending about 3 times the amount of time that our prior attorney was. So I had some pretty frank conversations with them about that and told them,
Well, I feel like if they were 5 months late getting the invoice, they ought to be 5 months late getting paid.
yes, so here's actually what I told, so one of the things that they said was, on the prosecution side, well, on the administrative side, they said they really wanted to, make sure they were covering all the political sensitivities of various things, but there were things like the hangar rental lease that we spent 8 hours on, which took me, half an hour. And basically what I convey to them is, well, yes, we want to be cognizant of political sensitivities, but if you don't get your hourly rate in check or how much time you're spending, you will be political sensitivity. So I've asked them to really pull back. I've spoken with our prior city attorney on how he spent his time. And I've asked them to kind of touch base with him. So yes, we've had some pretty thorough conversations, and I've told them that over the next basically 2 months, if we don't get our invoicing in on time, and if we find that we're spending too much time, that we're gonna have to reevaluate some of their services. So, yes, it was something quite frustrating when we started getting into it.
We didn't set it, it's just an hour, flat hourly rate.
Yeah, that's how they function. I mean, we had quite a deal with our prior attorney where it's 240 hours, try to work within that, we pay flat rate every month, and then over those hours, we paid on top of. Just other attorneys don't function like that, and the rate was doubled. That's what I told them. I said, we anticipated the rate being doubled, we budgeted for that, but what we didn't budget was for 3 times the amount of time we spent on things. And so, to be fair to them, they've done a very good job. There was kind of a backlog. Our prior attorney was doing double duty accounting before, so there's a few months backlog. So those first few months, they were really playing catch up on backlog and kind of a learning curve. And that's why I said over these next 2 months, really maybe evaluating the time being spent on things. Yeah.
I think when we budgeted for the same amount of hours that we were doing with the previous attorney, that's what we
Oh,
budgeted
that's-
for. And so we're watching that, because we're spending like in that same area.
Did you catch that? And so, yeah, so before we were around 18,000 a year, and now we budgeted around 36,000 a year based on the difference in the rate.
So we've got $4,000 left in the year.
No, because that was the end of this fiscal year. So, and we were fine with that fiscal year. We had enough to cover those costs and take care of everything. So now moving forward, that's particularly why I said in this new fiscal year, we'll be scrutinizing it.
Okay. Any other questions for Kim on the financial report? Okay, we'll move to water report. Terry.
Okay, Mayor and Council, you have the June 2022 water report in the packet. Are there any questions?
We're not in exceptional drought right here.
What's that?
We're not in the exceptional drought range
We're
right
talking
here.
about the map? Not yet. According to the drought monitor, we are not accepting.
I stepped outside today and it felt exceptional.
So we have, we're a little 63% of average precip on the water year that began October 1st. We conserved around 18%, June 2022 compared to June 2021. Keep in mind, we're asking our customers to conserve around 33%, but that's based off the green water year. And I think we're in the mid-20s probably. So we're doing pretty well, probably do a little better.
And we only have 90 acre feet left to recapture.
Yeah, that's city water. Yep. Yeah, it'll be a conservation pool, but sometime in August. So,
How much are we pumping out? We currently pumping it?
we're not currently. Well, we were doing the rest for our contract with the mill. Goes through,
November 1.
yeah, it goes through October.
We plan to send reminders out to customers to try to conserve water.
Yeah, we've been doing stuff. Brad, can you get another something out?
Well, we have sent stuff and all.
We're still getting a few phone calls wanting to know how this month's usage compared to last year. Am I down? Where am I at? I've had a couple of calls that way.
You know, when I came in and had you get a report from me, my use last year, I was surprised from my average last year how low it was. So I was below what we set it at. And I have cut back on what I used this year, so hopefully, I mean, just my house.
Several people comment the same thing, that I was using a lot more, and then I had just the opposite. I never expected that I would use that much, so.
Other questions?
Okay, thank you. All right, rec report, David Palmer.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I don't know that I have anything outside of the report that you have in your packets tonight. Unless you have something.
How many tournaments did we have this year?
We had end of the season, talking baseball.
Baseball, softball?
We had one baseball, one softball. End of the season, so.
Did we have a beginning season tournament?
Next year though, I plan on doing a mid-season tournament. As the season goes on, these kids are getting so involved and pulled in so many different directions that the
Other sports camps and things.
yeah, and so it's hard to have a full tournament, and so I've been tossing the idea around of doing a mid-season tournament. A lot of the other people like that, and then at the end of the season, doing an invitational where we invite teams outside of our league.
The mid-season tournament, what would that consist of?
So it would be about 2 weeks in, about the second weekend of the season.
Just
and
local?
we would do our league, so Moab, Monticello, and us, just our league tournament, and then at the end of the season, do, like I said, an invitational where it doesn't necessarily have to be our league teams. You can put together teams and just invite teams from other areas outside of the normal that we usually do. So.
I like that. I thought the whole program was well run this year, but I mean, it definitely by the end, everybody was off and everything, so that was unfortunate.
Yeah, it was really hard.
So it's a good idea to do it in the middle.
Yeah, despite our best efforts to run the tournaments, you know, you still have to have the kids available to play. So.
We have some travel leagues now, so that'll be nice for them to possibly come and do an end of the year non-league tournament. That's a great idea.
The fields have been used quite a bit too outside of the outside of our league with doing some scrimmages with some teams from outside, from some local coaches that have wanted to do that with some kids. It's gone well. And then also there's been some of our local teams doing some scrimmages against each other still, even though the season's over, just so that the fields are getting some good use this year, which is pretty good.
Do we anticipate having a little more participation in football with different teams outside of Columbia? I know COVID kind of messed that up for us.
It
was a
did
little
for a
better
bit,
last year.
but Colorado's back.
Okay.
And so we're hoping to get some games with Cortez. It's getting increasingly difficult to find games for the younger league, but not so much with the 5th and 6th graders. 5th and 6th graders is still strong. We can find opponents, but the 3rd and 4th is getting more and more difficult all the time.
Yeah, COVID did help kind of shut this down from it.
It did.
As it did everything else.
We still had a season. Our kids still grew and learned, and so that was good.
So you got record numbers on of visits to the wellness center. What would you attribute that to? One area in particular or just overall?
Well, last year we did get all brand new equipment, made some nice upgrades in there, got some really good media out there from some good comments from members of our community as well. And a lot of people saw that and checked it out. we did, we tried to, it's such a small room. And so we try to get as much in there as possible, try to cover all areas. Adding a few more free weights has made a big difference on that too. Just a few more options for some of your rather than just exercisers.
We determine the importance of money as we spend it as city council members, that to 9,800 visits. And that's people just coming in to use, it's not when you do a tournament or a basket, and that's just people coming in to use the facility as a.
Yeah, let me clarify that. So that is just people who have a membership with a card that they can swipe.
Right.
So when they check in, people who are paying for a one-time visit, those numbers aren't counted, but I did put the numbers in there, like how many one-time visits just for the month of June that we had. So that you add that together, and then people, when they forget their passes and our front desk staff has to look them up, those numbers don't always get put
And
on
that's the
there.
pool and the rest.
Yeah, it's combined numbers. There's no way to really tell whether they're using the facility or what they check.
2,400 in paying patrons.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody pays their membership, but non-members patrons.
Yes. So, yeah, that was, and I looked at last year's number to compare that to, and last year, I wrote the same thing in the report for July, is that we had record numbers, and we were able to top that.
Probably because it's cooler
We
in
did it
there,
by about 1,000. It was, sorry,
probably because it's cooler inside than working out outside.
when the AC's were. So, yeah.
Turn the
It was very
sprinkler
hot, there's a bubble.
Yeah, so, and we did just put a brand new unit in the first week of July.
Oh,
And so they're still working out the bugs on that, and it hasn't, they're getting there. So,
our volleyball tournament was huge too.
Yeah, it was.
Glad to support the volleyball team.
Okay, any more questions for David?
thank you.
Good job.
All right, police report, Chief Bradford.
Mayor Council, you've got the staff report, print out. We're into about a month and a half now to our dispatch trial with Price, and that's going pretty well. And a couple of steps with, I'm trying to figure out locations where to find the right people, but overall, it's going very well. What we're getting so far.
Do you want to touch on some of this line about number of calls?
Oh, yeah. I actually know what I put on there, so.
Oh,
With our calls with dispatch, we're not getting a call every time we do a bin inspection or an 911 anymore. Realize we're just spending a lot more time writing the report and being out control. So that's why the numbers this month show that our incidents are down. So we're actually not where we normally would be. We're just not writing as many reports for doing the bin inspection. We're not going to sit down for 5 minutes. Writing down the bin inspection.
So the reporting is.
But it's going well. We're gonna test for a new officer next Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Take a position back with County to do the work there. Yeah, he'll be missed.
Yeah,
A lot of work for us.
testing, what's the,
We run through the physical fitness test and interview. Just
even the certified officers go through physical fitness and all
Very across the board.
What's the process if you decide to hire one of these guys that's not certified? Is there,
We pick up a non-certified applicant, we'll have to get a reservation with post, which we can't make a reservation with them until we have a name to give them. And then we're just next in line for open spot academy, so it can be 1 or 2 academies down the road before we get somebody into it.
On creep time.
Yeah, it should be 6, 8 months before we get somebody back up. Hopefully, that sounds good. Fourth of July was, I'll kind of probably one of the quietest I've ever been part of. Not a lot of calls for us, which was great. Only saw one get all off ATVs with me illegally, so we're going fast and get fell off. I'm down the street, but yeah, I have to chase the guy down and they got home. So other than that, still pretty good.
I just reached out to the mayor of South Jordan, just from that last training with them, and they were all very pleased and happy with our department down there. They were glad that they could come do that. So, I was happy that we made it work.
Yeah, we did some training earlier this week, last week. Where we implemented some of the stuff we learned and brought in more of the guys that didn't go to the training.
That's for the active shooter.
Yeah. The trailer to 284 something Moab the last 2 days of June. Put on by the Department of Public Safety SWAT team. First three. Guys, respond ourselves. Doing great.
It's not if, it's a when, probably.
Unfortunately, yes. I'm afraid you might be right. But we are spending more time at the school.
Any other questions for Chief Crafter? Thank you, Chief.
Great news, yeah. Our officers are doing awesome, especially with one staff member short, and I know Chief has been on some really stressful calls the last few weeks, so I just want to express gratitude.
Thank you.
Yeah, on that same note with the schools, is the watchdog program still in effect? I think it is.
Yeah. The elementary school. Well, that's anything different from middle school or high school or anything. Okay. Fire report, Chief Spindler.
So I filled in for us today. There's just a quick scenario or quick summary here. He's on vacation, so we've got a couple new recruits and we had a couple fill off as far as the volunteer firefighters are concerned. And as you can see, there's been a couple brush fires, and a few they've been putting in a lot of good hours. And Chief Spillman has been doing great. He and I have been working together with some of the state entities to make sure we get all our reporting and things in. And there's been some transition with some of the state and positions of some of the state entities that we normally do reporting. And one particular report that we do each year, they are creating a new version of it for smaller cities. So instead of doing this long 15-page report, it'll be a few pages. But that's going to be awesome.
I was talking with the county fire guy this morning, and I wasn't aware that there were active fires going on right now. Do we have people out on those fires?
I have not heard whether or not, what you can see here, you mentioned that we've had 2 brush fires, but I haven't been.
Just on the bigger fires, I don't think we have any of our.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm aware, but there are several big fires in the state.
No, in the county, we have some.
Only in the county.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a fire up LaSalle, and there's smoke coming out this way.
Oh, no, I have no those either.
I can follow up and see, but
Would they call us? Would they call us if they needed us?
yeah, and we have some mutual aid,
Right.
Or first response.
yeah.
One, and not all of them can respond, they have to be certified, and I don't, how many do we have that can do that, do you know?
So you're mentioning what Tim just said, I don't know.
Gosh, I want to take a stab at it, say 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 4 or 5, we have that are even certified to go and help with this.
That's funny, we were saying the same thing.
Anything on the 4th of July?
No, 4th of July, I understand, it's pretty quiet, so. And from the police side of things, we were pretty quiet on 4th of July and.
Let's see what our holiday tonight.
It was pretty quiet, other than 25 minutes of pure fireworks, so.
That was great.
We'll talk about that here.
Okay, well, thank you. We will move to our presentations. I have the first one. This year we started a new award, I guess. the Citizen of the Year Award. And it is given to recognize someone that lives in the city who, through different involvement within the city, different leadership, time, talent that they give to the city, we are gonna award them and have them ride in our parade. We did that this year. The intent of it is to honor those who have made contributions to Blanding, that result in just a better community, a better place to live, for everyone that's here. So this year, our Citizen of the Year, who rode in the parade this year, is Janet Wilcox. Janet is known for her years spent as a teacher at San Juan High School and her years of service throughout Blanding. It's not a surprise that she was nominated for the award by many different people, so there was lots of different nominations there. A summary of some of the things that she likes and enjoys are her love for service, her love for writing, quilting, historical research, preserving family histories, piano, scrapbooking, teaching, gardening, playing games with grandkids, and of course being a mom. So we are grateful for Janet and appreciate her and want to give her a round of applause. And also if you'll come up, Janet, we have a little plaque for you. This top thing comes off, so just.
We've got a little box for you.
I'll have you stand in there and take a picture.
don't need to be.
1, 2, 3. Hey. Thanks, Janet. We appreciate you.
I need to apologize to Janet for, I still don't speak or write well.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, I hope it's a start of a really good thing for the community and something we can keep going for a long time.
Love it.
Very
Good job.
Okay, we'll give the next piece of time here to Pat for 4th of July and parade stuff.
Before Pratt speaks, I want to thank him for the time and effort that he spent, and I thought it was a great deal. I second that.
Yes, I've had many people ask me, oh, aren't you so stressed out on the 4th? And I said, the first time I've been involved with city events where I haven't been stressed out.
That's just an average.
You can blush now.
I'll second that motion too.
You do a wonderful job. You really do.
I appreciate that. Appreciate it. San Juan Chair, USU and Blue Mountain Hospital will come up. We will get them their awards. Best performance and people's choice goes to San Juan Chair.
All right.
The People's Choice was a new thing that we implemented a week before the 4th of July, but we made it work. You could text in and vote, and so they received the most votes from the public.
Very nice.
Best theme, Blue Mountain Hospital, Trent Herring's here to represent them.
Candy.
And then grand prize best overall goes to USU.
Maybe Sam.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, they're on the street.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, council, you all just step right there.
I think closer. There you go.
There we go. 1, 2, 3. Hey, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. That was awesome.
35 entrances in this year's parade, and I'm sure there were a few more that showed up 4th of July morning. Nikki didn't tell me that number, but I'm guessing there was a few more. 4th of July recap. You guys have any questions or thoughts or anything that was on that report that you want to expound on?
There were so many things to do, and I mean, that was really, really good way. I mean, we didn't leave anyone out, it felt like. There was enough for everyone to do, but it wasn't it didn't cross over anything, like it just felt like there was continuous things and they were all fun and they were all well organized and put together. And we could do a week 4th of July every year, I feel like.
We needed another 10 pounds of candy.
We ran out of candy.
That was
Side
because we
note.
ate it at the staff here.
Side note, we didn't- city council didn't-
Terry's looking at y'all like, no.
3
you
more
didn't.
boxes.
Are you saying that failed?
I know, I think other people took some of our candy. I don't think you fell.
We'll make sure we get
I
it.
I think there was more fire trucks and stuff, which is what we need those. I think that was wonderful.
There was a couple of ones that did not come in.
The fireworks show was awesome.
That's easy to fix.
Yeah, that's for sure.
If you're gonna have
Yeah, we were
problems,
so
let's have
sad at the end because we're still people. You're out of candy.
More
It's the worst.
candy.
I was throwing a water ball.
You can just throw water. maybe.
But that's one, it depended on who it was, on how it got thrown, either a lob or an overhead.
Even writing on the fire truck was fun. I
Yeah.
loved that.
I thought that was a good, I don't know if anyone sat inside, but yeah, having the back and the inside option was, I thought, ideal for those that were willing to participate.
We didn't get wet.
Good.
But I just point that out in that we've always had amazing 4th of July, but there was something about this, the way that everything was organized and how many things you had and how many different things you offered. It felt very, just something for everybody in a wonderful way. So the only thing I would say is that there felt like there weren't quite enough floats in the parade, and I don't know if there's a way to organize it differently or to request more people do floats. It felt like a lot of non-floats, but
Last year was our biggest parade, and I think it fell on a Saturday last year, which is probably why it felt even smaller. It's just because we had like a record year, and then this year, I don't know, I guess we need the pharmacy, UNHS, UNHS had one.
Pharmacy had one.
Police department.
Did
Oh, the
you
pharmacy
float?
did, okay.
no, I'm talking floats.
Where's your
Eagle Air, yeah, we need an Eagle Air Guardian flight.
There you go.
They were flying above the parade.
Yeah, they did a great job on the overhead.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
did.
that was actually.
There was a couple of those guys who really like to fly low. Going fast, so.
That's why we're
Yeah, they were perfect.
Yeah, that's what we can do, right? No, we can have that next year, see if we can get more people involved for sure.
To do floats. There's one, I thought the
Entry
trade
is
was great.
separate from floats, right?
Right.
Floats being.
Yeah, being like truck with
You know,
trailer,
right, yeah, being more.
all
Well, I
The
think
high
it felt,
school used to do them, it felt like, and it
yeah,
was the only thing I know of the whole time.
it was nice that it was on a weekend because it felt, I mean, I didn't feel rushed to be. at
So how are we
this
gonna do it
time.
on Tuesday next year?
I guess we start on Friday. and
that. I was
just
gonna
keep
say,
going.
really, we'll start stuff, if not Friday, Saturday, and we'll have stuff Saturday. We'll do the chalk art event really well on Sunday, because it was just like smooth going, you didn't have to rush down there, and then they were there for people to view Monday and Tuesday. But I'm guessing next year they'll do the softball tournaments Monday into Tuesday morning, and so we can do a couple of those things, Saturday or even Friday. So I think we'll have a similar flow next year, actually. But yeah, so next year's Tuesday, everyone spread the word. We're gonna get 90 phone calls, but it is always on the 4th of July, so. But
Except for the fireworks.
no,
Never say always.
That's up to you guys.
They need to be planned out for the
No,
fall.
they'll be planned, but the issue we had was fixed. As you saw, we had a phenomenal show on the 9th, and they enjoyed being in the landing, and I think we'll have them back next year. And they sent over the contract finally for this year, so I'll try to stick it
Great
out.
band, too.
Get other things. Yeah, they did really good, so. But yeah, overall, I just wanted to point out that second paragraph, thank everyone, the staff that came and helped. Nikki and Kim are fully just volunteers that handle that parade, and that makes my life a lot easier, so I want them to do. Thanks especially Energy Fuels and USU for being sponsors of the event as well. And then just a random, there's so many people involved, I don't want to go over this list and miss someone, so just read the list if you're listening. The list of thank yous will be here forever enshrined in our council packets. So we appreciate all of our partners. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
We agree. Excellent job. Great. People should go get one of those awards.
Yeah, think in the past, because we have them do it, and then on the outgoing.
They'll do next year too, right?
So Nikki has passed it off to Ken, now Ken
They'll
will.
do next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a site.
Sounds like they don't get quite enough recognition.
Yeah, maybe we could get them something for helping out, especially with that. Okay, any follow-up on the floor? What else do y'all want to say about it? Good?
Sorry, I missed it.
It's good.
Are you really though?
No, it was good.
Yeah, I wasn't here for most of the
Really?
weekend, but I was kind of bummed about it.
You were fishing. You were, I paid dearly for my
For
treatment.
not being on our float. Right.
All righty, so we will move into our business items. We have a few of them. Our first one is the waste management agreement. David.
So, Mayor and Council, I've got Dan Darnell from Waste Management on. Our mic has been having trouble lately. Dan, can you hear us okay? Me. Unmute you.
I can make out about every third word, so hopefully this will work.
Okay, Dan, thank you. So, Mayor and Council, as we discussed prior, we've historically used the CPI Consumer Price Index, which is overlooks the broader economy to determine rates. And that carried over from when we were with BSI, and then Waste Management took over that contract. And as discussed with the council prior, we had an option to go to the WST index, also referred to as CPIU, which is less volatile because it looks specifically at what's reminding water, sewer, trash. And it only compares against water, sewer, and trash. It also already incorporates fuel costs. But transitioning to that new index then increases our upfront costs. But year over, we'll see less volatility in our rate increases each year. And so that was the direction that we went with. And we worked with Dan and our attorney to do the contract and put it as such as directed by the council. I don't know if there's any questions outside of what's on the report. It's already been discussed in prior meeting.
Are there any changes on this from our previous discussion?
There's a couple little tweaks, like, for example, more of the benefits, such as the number of garbage cans we get for our 4th of July event, which cans we have on Main Street and in different areas in the city and when they're picked up. But those are pretty minor changes, nothing that impacts the actual rates to the customer. No changes outside of the rate to the customer that we have discussed.
So maybe I'm sorry, what's this gentleman's name?
Dan.
Dan, hi Dan.
How are you, Ben?
Good, how are you? So one of my concerns with I didn't vote for the CPI index.
You're the WS.
I didn't vote for the WST index. Part of the reason was, one of my concerns is that if fuel prices specifically go back down, we wouldn't see necessarily a decrease in our rates like we would with the WST index on the CPI index. Is that correct?
Well, it's really not indexed off the fuel. Okay, so your CPIU, which is a commodities index, so basically it's what's happening with bread. Fuel is also in there. Some consumable sorts of things. Last month was 8.6%. If you go to a utility index, which is what the water, the sewer, and the trash index is, if you go to that utility index, it was, what was it, 4.2, or anyway, it was about half that. And it's a more stable index. I've been trying to get all of our communities that are on CPIU to go to that direction. There are times when CPIU is very low, like 1 or 2%, in which case the WST will probably track about 1% higher. But in the long run, when your commodity index goes crazy, like it's going right now, you really need to be in a stable environment. And the most stable environment is going to be your utility indexes. And it's really more appropriate because you're trying to track the costs and what's happening in the utilities index. The water, the wastewater, the sanitation, and that's really what this index is specifically designed to do. Taken into consideration in that index is the fuel, where CPIU will track that along with every other commodity. So, you know, you really, I just feel that it's my fiduciary responsibility to the contracts that I manage to give them the best advice that I can. And although we could have stayed with CPIU and you would have gotten an 8.6%, I think it was in March, 8.4 to 8.6% increase, I just felt that it was better if you looked at this utility index.
Well, the utility index definitely makes sense. That part makes sense to me. I just, on the graph that we had seen before, my concern is that if you look over time, if inflation does go down and things go down in the CPI index, that we could see more of a decrease during those times. So it just didn't, it seemed like maybe we wouldn't make up this inflation. We wouldn't get the credit back for this inflation in the WST that we might see in the CPI. But it does make sense to be in the just waste and trash services. That makes sense to me. Yeah, no, that's helpful. The rest of the council voted for the WST, so we're already headed that direction. I just wanted to understand it a little better. So thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions on this? This now contract. Not, I'll take a motion to either, well, motion to approve unless you're not.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 07-12-2022-1.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Johnson and a second by Councilmember Ewald to approve resolution 7-12-2022-1, the waste management contract. Any questions on the motion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? That's everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for being here,
Thanks,
Dan.
Dan.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Are you really a Utah company?
I couldn't hear that.
Are you a Utah company? Says Waste Management of Utah.
Yeah, yes, we have waste management in Utah. We have waste management in Colorado and New Mexico. So my territory actually runs from Midland, Odessa, Texas to basically Blanding, Utah. And so I have all of New Mexico, part of West Texas, part of Colorado, Southwest Colorado, Southeast Utah. So wherever my contracts are at, I work under that INC.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
Dan. Appreciate it.
Sorry, I'll just say real quick, for me, this is an easy one. Sometimes contracts aren't, but I feel like your company provides excellent service to our city. So I run businesses and even personally at my own home, I think your crews do a great job and we sure appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate that feedback. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You take
Good night.
Okay, so we are on our second business item, resolution 7-12-2022-2, the Sunrise Outfitting CDA request.
Well, glad that Josh and his dad are here today. We've been going through this process really throughout the entire year. We've got so many council members that have changed and whatnot. Are you familiar with this at all? Is
A little bit.
just okay. So they are our first. They are our first commercial. They're kind of the reason this got built and created, and we're grateful for them working with us and being patient. But if you look at the we've got a couple of different things here, but if you look at just the background, in March 22nd, that second meeting of March, council approved moving forward with the CDA for Sunrise Outfitting pending cost estimates for completion. Their building is pretty close to being completed, but they completed their utility connections and they have completed giving us those cost estimates as well, which were kind of the final two pieces that we needed from them. One of the things we wanted to add in that second paragraph, we had the grading rubric. We graded them for up to $12,000. There was 18 points possible on that. Just the water main infrastructure was $18,000. I'm sure the Nelsons could go into detail of the other extensive costs, but they've met what they've asked, and so it is now Planning City's turn to enter into an agreement with them. So the recommendation here would be for council to choose an amount they wish to reimburse them. I don't know the right verbiage of this. I think we kind of talked about 12,000 in March. That is up to you guys to change that as always, but they have done everything we've asked.
Well, if I can add a couple of things. One, based on the policy that was approved, I would recommend that the council stick within that policy for what's recommended on there, because otherwise it kind of sets a precedence of not following the policy that was approved. Secondarily, since this is the first one, this is being done a little bit differently. In the future, what we'll do is if a development or a developer comes to us with a request, they'll come with a request to enter into a contract and it'll be post-performance. And then once they've performed and brought their costs, then they'll come back for advice and consent to then move forward with the fulfillment of that contract here, because we did the policy and we're kind of having all these discussions at the same time. They got their costs basically after they fulfilled what we have listed up there in this type of contract. So
Where does this leave us? Say 3 years down the road, you guys decide we're done.
so what do you mean exactly? You mean so once it's paid, it's paid.
And we pay them,
reimbursed.
but what happens 3 years, 5, 10 years, if you guys decide to go out of business? The city's, where does that leave us for dollars?
Well, that leaves us without, basically this is a reimbursement because of what they're contributing to city infrastructure. And that was one of the things that we talked about as one of the, when we discussed pros and cons of this kind of policy, that is one of the cons. If the business were to go out of business later, the city would have already.
I mean, granted, I don't want anybody to go out of business.
Sure. Right. But there's always
They'll
that.
be left with a beautiful building that they can turn on
Yeah, you just hope
to
that.
another business that can then operate out of that building. I mean, I'd love to have that building right now. So I'm super excited for them.
You sell your building to Sheriff, start over?
Sunset Outfitters was in there.
So.
But anyway, the connection, and we'll have the connection and the facility that will be there for another business. That's money.
Yeah, we're not paying for their business. We are reimbursing them for the strive they took to expand infrastructure on their property. That's the best way to look at it in terms of Sunrise as an outfitter isn't getting anything. Their property is what's being enhanced, and that's what we're trying to reimburse. That's how I look at
Sure,
it.
they're getting something. They're getting a reduction in their cost. So you have to look at that. But that said, I was here when we voted to follow this whatever he said, to allow that. I will make a motion and we approve the 12,000 we committed to at meeting.
I'll second. Is that, just a real quick question on the motion I have. Does that amount need to be listed in the resolution?
So, yeah, well, not necessarily in the resolution, because the resolution is saying that we'll enter into a contract. And that's why I kind of gave that disclaimer of how we'll work in the future, because typically it'll come to council to approve how much you want to approve the contract for, and then come back saying, hey, they fulfilled that approve us to go forward. We're kind of doing all at once right now. So we're entering in the contract and sign it.
And we'll fill this out with the 12,000 with signatures on it. So the contract, what we just entered was what amount we're putting on here, and then the resolution would solidify this contract. That was my understanding of the
So we need a
process.
motion for the resolution.
Yes, yes.
So
we
approve the
will.
resolution.
We found that.
Did you read the resolution?
I'm not reading the resolution.
So
It's too long.
That's a question, that's a question for Dave. I'm not sure. if that's
Number
what you would have.
-12-02-02-2, resolution approving commercial development agreement between Sunrise Outfitting and Plain City.
Thank you so much.
Seconded by.
Okay, so what we got here is we got a motion by Councilmember Grover, seconded by Councilmember Gossett for resolution 7-12-2022-2, the Sunrise Outfitting CDA requesting the amount of $12,000. Any questions on the motion? If not, all in favor? Not everyone.
It's a nice looking building.
I personally think this is a great thing that the city's done to add infrastructure to our buildings. Because I'm sure it put a lot more into infrastructure than what we're not even coming close to probably touching, because that was just the water, right? Just the water, just water alone. Yeah. So I think this is a great.
Water.
We're excited. And we're excited for you guys.
and if I can add, I just appreciate their patience because this was something that we as a city hadn't done in the past in this capacity in this way. And it's a frustrating process, and it's the first time that they've kind of gone through a process like this as well. So I appreciate their collaboration.
When you guys plan to be open?
I was been looking at all the dates, and we need to confirm this, but I'm hoping to do an open house on August 12th. I think he won't be here.
Well, keep us posted.
There's the fair, then the school starts, and then everything.
There is a week in between, so you got a week there.
Probably the 12th.
It is the 12th, right? Well, keep us posted. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Okay, our next one is business item number 3, which is resolution 7-12-2022-3, the Steel Solar Contract Amendment. Terry.
All right, Mayor, Council. I want to make this take forever, but I want to make sure that everyone kind of understands what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. So we've seen kind of all over the country since the COVID pandemic and everything, supply chain constraints, and that has impacted the solar industry quite a bit. A lot of projects have been canceled, and most projects delayed. So with the Still Solar project, a couple of things. UAMPS has entered into a power purchase agreement with Desiree, which is the developer for the Still Solar project. And we have contracted with UAMPS to buy a certain amount of power, 646 kilowatt hours, through the firm power purchase agreement. And so with the Desiree asked for some changes to the contract based on force majeure, act of God type changes, associated with the global pandemic. And UAMPS General Counsel has recommended to the UAMPS Board of Directors that they accept those changes, and that's happened. So now that leaves us in a situation where we need to amend and restate our transaction schedule for the agreement that we have to buy the power generated by the project from UAMPS. And so what that really boils down to is some date changes and some price changes. The project has slipped some based on the availability of the solar modules themselves coming from overseas. And initially we were supposed to have the COD commercial operation date this coming December of this calendar year, and that's been pushed to September of 2023. So that's one of the big changes. We were expecting to start getting energy end of December, and now we won't until September. The other change is the cost of the power is moving from $31.35 per megawatt hour to $34.55 per megawatt hour. Hopefully you're able to look through. I included some talking points. I got a different revision on some of those talking points after I got this today for the packet. And they were based on some questions from other UAMPS members. I think I'm going to read through those real quick. I think they'll probably answer some of your questions and help us understand what these changes are. So the first question is, what protections are in the new amended and restated power purchase agreements for Still Solar 1A and Still Solar 1B for non-performance? The development, security, and delay damage amounts were increased in the amended and restated PPAs by approximately 20%. So if the developer causes delay past September 2023, those damages have been increased to protect us. The next one, what guarantee do we have that the amended and restated power purchase agreements price per megawatt hour will not increase again? Contract price in the power purchase agreements include language that states, in no event shall the contract price be increased for any reason, including excused delay or force majeure. Third is, what would happen if a participant does not approve the amended and restated transaction schedule? Interest has been received from other UAMPS members willing to pick up any available output from the Still Solar 1A and Still Solar 1B. So if we chose to not move forward, there's other UAMPS members who would be happy to jump on that. Last is, if the terms and conditions were not met in the original PPAs, why did UAMPS not terminate the project? Any alternative solar PPA would be at an increased price with an online date of approximately 5 years due to transmission restrictions and equipment availability. So really, and that's kind of what the UAMPS Board of Directors looked at. Yes, we're increasing from 31.35 to 34.55, but even if we could build a different project, it would take 5 years to get that thing going, and it would be at a higher price than the 34.55. And so that's why I recommend that we move forward and approve the resolution amending and restating the transaction schedule. Not sure if I missed anything or what questions you guys have. Let's move on.
So they've agreed to these changes, they've agreed to the changes as you just read, that meaning that they can increase the rate again.
That's correct.
But
They cannot.
the Still Solar resources.
Yeah, if there's another act of God or something, they can't ask for another increase. Oh, also, one other thing I've mentioned on pricing, there is no escalator. Some of these projects have an escalator, where that energy price will increase 2% every year or something. There, so for the 25-year life of this project, the energy will be at that $34.55 per megawatt hour.
So 25 years, that's the price.
Correct.
And the project life expectancy is 25 years.
That's correct.
How does that price compare to other energy sources?
To other energy sources, I mean, it just varies across the board. We pay less than that for some of our energy and more. The carbon-free power project, but we have quite a bit of, we're looking at $55 a megawatt hour for the lowest cost of energy, and that's kind of pre-COVID pandemic / inflation. So, it's pretty good. Of course, solar makes energy when the sun shines too. So that's why we're willing to pay more for the carbon-free project, because it's dispatchable when we need it. Got it.
This project is located in
Brigham City. Yes. UAMPS has another solar project they're developing currently in Red Mesa, here just south of us, and disaster. Well, they're looking at bigger delays and bigger price changes. That project actually was cheaper than this project, but we're not in the race.
What do we have into it now? We don't have any money into it, right?
We do.
What is the increase on that?
There isn't any.
There is, it's just an increase on the rate. That's what's in this.
But there's potential for increase, all right, maybe I should phrase this as a question. There's potential for increase in investment if they need to do more studies or.
No, not on this project, because it's under contract.
That's what I wanted to mention.
What percentage of our power will come from this?
So I did look at that. It would be about 13% of our peak load. You know, and of course, there's always a capacity factor. You know, we're not actually going to get 646 kilowatt hours. You know, certainly not 24 hours a day. It gets dark, the sun doesn't shine, and so it's really a lot smaller portion of 13% of our total load, of our peak load. But it's a significant portion. We felt like it was a good amount of solar based on our average load.
Have you been out to see the project?
I have not.
Do we know where it's, I mean, are they moving forward?
It's in Brigham City, so
We need to have.
our module,
backup.
yeah, so there's been, one of the big things with the solar industry, solar modules are having a hard time coming into the country because of forced labor. And they guaranteed us that these modules, that are, I can't remember the name of the contractor, I think they have it here. Longi is the panel manufacturer, and they're supposed to, you know, the UAMPS attorneys and everything feel like that they've dotted all the i's, crossed all the t's to make sure that these panels will not get held up in customs. So we should be good to go on that. I believe they're already doing some construction work up there, getting ready for the project. We won't have any, the transmission is already locked in. The UAMPS members that are in the 1B project, we're in 1A. They may have some curtailment, which means the energy they get will be reduced based on availability of transmission. But we don't have that risk or that problem.
Kind of off the wall here, Terry. Have we ever had anybody participate in this college scholarship program from UAMPS?
No,
Well, so this will be new once the project's done. No,
but I think that's a benefit that we need, I mean, if we can promote, it's worth.
yeah.
Like, I think there's lots of things that happen within these different places we're involved with, the UAMPS or the league. I mean, an example is with the league, they do a writing contest every year that none of our schools have ever done. And this year they have over, I think, 60 kids participating. So a lot of us just not know it. So I think if we know about it, we can catch the added benefits of being involved with these things.
So kids could actually get applying for that pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Is there any downside to this?
No, I mean, we're already under contract. I think we, possible, so we can move forward.
If any of the other members that are participating decided not to drop out, they would just sell that. They would just disperse that. We would have to come and do this again if any of the listed.
Correct. That's my understanding.
Can we purchase more?
There's not any more available.
If
Yeah,
one
so,
drops out?
yeah, certainly we would have, I would, so what they typically do is they would look at the percentage of entitlement that we have, and we would have an opportunity at that much of whoever dropped out. So it would kind of depend on which other entity left. You know, some of those guys have 6% of the project, and some of them have up to 16.
What's our percentage?
25. We're 1.6%.
Lehigh has 25.
Yeah, Lehigh is, I think, the big district.
Yeah. One of those.
Is there a reason we didn't get more at the time? Are we trying to be conservative? or-
Well, we're trying to balance solar, yeah, because you don't have all the power available all the time, and so then we don't want to get too much at once when we don't need it.
Do we pay for it even if we don't use it?
Well, not necessarily, because it can be sold back on the pool to other cities who might need it. But there is the possibility of, there's someone that's still, if there's no one willing to buy it, and that is one of the tricky things with solar power, as in history as a whole. The sun, you have storms here and there, and so everyone's producing a different amount, but you could have more solar being produced than anyone can use.
Any other questions for Terry? If not, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 7/12/2022-3, the Still Solar 1A project amended in the stated transaction.
Second. Okay, that's Councilmember Bowers and Councilmember Grover with resolution 7/12/2022-3, the Steel Solar Contract Amendment. Any questions on the motion? If there's none, all in favor? That is everyone. Motion carries. We'll move to, thank you, you're next as well. Thank you, done. The rest of this is all you.
Not so.
So this is the water master plan.
Yeah, so council members, we entered into a contract with Jones and DeMille Engineering to do our water master plan. The contract on that was $38,900. We were able to get a grant from Utah Division of Drinking Water. So this is a 100% grant project. And this is updating our plan from 10 years ago and updating our hydraulic model. And so, yeah, we've contracted with Jones and DeMille. We have Javen Ivins here and Scoot Flannery, and Javen is going to present kind of a summary and the findings that we're looking at in that. And I will let him go.
Thanks, Terry. JJ, looks like you're gonna have to catch me this time.
He does pass out.
I do.
Last time I was here,
I
bends
just
your
got-
knees.
Yeah.
Might need to sit
This
down.
council's not as scary as the last.
Well, good evening, council, mayor. I guess I'll just give a short introduction. I think I know most of you probably know me, but I'm Javen Ivins. I work with Jones and DeMille. Our office is over there in Monticello. And I'm one of the engineers that worked on this along with many others. There were several of us that had a part in this. And as you can see, I believe you got the whole thing in your packet. It's quite extensive. And so I'll try to keep this short and kind of just touch on a few main points that I wanted to kind of get on and do my best to answer your questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of just a short summary, and I'll just read this. The culinary water master plan provides an outline of existing system components such as storage, system piping, water rights, and sources. The plan also provides recommendations for the cities to supply water for the projected growth through 2060. The recommendations in this plan are given to meet the minimum level of service required by the state while providing the best value to the city. Some of the system performance things that I wanted to touch on are highlighted here. Existing system and source capacity. Currently, the system is functioning quite well. I mean, I think the plant is kind of known for having good water and supplying their customers with water. Source capacity was one thing that I wanted to kind of just mention here. Trying to sit through my notes and everything here. So there's, I guess I'm going to call it 4 main sources that Blanding gets its water from. Most of it comes from the 3 creeks, Johnson Creek, Indian Creek, and Recapture Creek. And also, as I'm sure you all know, there's several wells that Blanding gets invested in around the city. And something that I wanted to mention relating to the creeks, historic flow values into the reservoirs were not available, and therefore the lowest reported value. Storage volume was considered as the surface water sourcing limiting factor. And so I included this table here, which is also included in your reports, table 7-3. There's several different scenarios that we ran with and looked into to kind of determine.
Sorry, it's on page 78 of your packet, on page 11
So these are just a few of the I guess guess, limiting or potential limiting factors when it comes to water that the city has available. And as you can see right here, we just went through and figured out what the storage or projected storage for each of these would be. And then ran that as a flow of what would be available to the city. And how we determined this was we completely exhausted the source over a 6-month period. And the reason we chose the 6 months is because the months from April to the end of September, the city uses 73% of its water. And so that's obviously the peak time, it's obvious everybody's watering their lawns and everything. And so that's where these numbers all come from. And I will get a little more into that when we go over kind of the recommended improvements where the city kind of stands as we look into the future for expected growth and everything. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was water rights. As you can see right here, paper water rights, the city's doing pretty well. There's I guess a lot available theoretically. The issue with that though is, as you all know, that's dependent on what is actually available, the precipitation, the runoff that we have. And so these numbers with the water associated with the water rights can be deceiving. It can look like there's more available, but that isn't necessarily all the case. It's kind of on a year-by-year basis. So, I mean, as you can see right there, there's an available flow of about 2,800 gallons per minute. But if you look at some of these other scenarios, like minimum beginning storage, which is inclusive of all the reservoirs and all the storage that Blanding has available, it is much lower. And so that's kind of something to take into consideration when you're looking at and analyzing the water rights. Something else that I wanted to touch on relating to water rights was source development and well proofs. So an extension was filed and has been approved for the wells to be proved up on. And those have now been extended to 2027, 2028. I think the exact date is included in the report. And the reason that the extension was filed, and I think that Terry can probably speak more to this, but it requires developing the sources. I mean, there's rights available, but it's just a matter of going out and actually developing those rights and developing, I think that both of those are for, obviously for wells. And so it would be just a matter of, determining a good project, good location, and the reason to implement those projects. So yeah, that's where we're at as far as water rights go. The distribution system, and this is something that I will touch on when we get to recommended improvements. But typically what we like to shoot for the system is that it's usually based on fire flow. That's typically the one. And depending on the building, 1,000 to 1,500 gallons per minute is what is required, and that's dependent on the building size and different factors that play into that. But that's kind of what we shoot for. And then I wanted to touch on there we go, on growth areas that we talked, or that we analyzed in the study. This is included in the maps. There's several, like a series of different growth areas that we analyze and assign different connections to.
The maps are on page 88. So you'll see the maps have their own numbers. I think it's
9 back then.
Yeah, so there's a series associated with each of these actually. It kind of goes through piece by piece of the city, so you can see kind of in a large section of each part of the city.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And so in that, you can see the highlighted yellow parts were the areas of potential growth that we looked at and analyzed. And each of these areas were assigned based on their area and recommendations from the city. We assigned different demands to what was expected of those in the future. And these are actually some of the improvements. I don't know if you can see the contour lines through there, but with the projected 2060 build out, this is kind of the type of performance that could be expected with these growth areas completely built out.
Here's the yellow area.
The yellow areas, yeah. So that's stuff that would be added, and then obviously there's associated improvements with those areas. And so some of the recommended improvements that I wanted to touch on. Some of these include water rights, like I mentioned before, sufficient on paper. It looks good, but it's never a bad idea to continue planning for the future. And even though there's on paper a lot available theoretically, that doesn't always mean that's what you're going to be able to use. And so this table that I have right here is the same one that I showed the other on the other slide. I just wanted to highlight again the flows and different scenarios that could potentially impact the city.
Maybe you mentioned the growth rate, Jay, and why we chose.
Yeah, so the growth rate that we went with for the projected 2060 build out was 0.66, which is from the governor's office of I forget the acronym. GOM is the acronym. But anyways, they just kind of issue for different municipalities. They give different growth rates and projected growth scenarios.
They tell us how to grow.
Yeah. And that was based on census data for the past 30 years. And so planning has maintained from like 1990 to 2020, 0.66% growth rate. And that's why we chose that, just to kind of, expecting similar growth. That's what we could expect for impacts to the system. Basically over the next 40 years, right? And something I guess to consider, and I think it's on one of the, I can't remember which page it's on, but you can see where we model what the projected growth is. It kind of spikes up in 1990 to 2000, and then there's a period of no growth. In fact, the census data, I think the population was exactly the same in 1990 and 2000. And then from 2000 to 2020, it shot up pretty steeply again. And so, and I guess that's maybe one of the reasons why we recommend updating these master plans so often, because growth, I mean, you can estimate it, but it's hard to say what's really actually going on. Sometimes you're going to have peaks, sometimes it's going to all come at once, sometimes there's going to be no growth. And so, this that would be something to keep in mind. As far as that goes. Okay. And then another recommended improvement, so water sources. The 2060 ERCs, which that stands for equivalent residential connection, that's essentially just what the average house would use for their single connection. It's kind of just a way that we can measure and project what type of water And that comes out to be 222,227, which requires a demand of 1790 gallons per minute. The available flow, as you can see, given the worst scenario, is 1410 right there, which is the minimum beginning storage with the storage that we have currently. Also, with running the wells produce a rate of, I think, combined, if we're running all three of them, 718 gallons per minute. And so that's where the 2,147 gallons per minute comes from. Something to note on that, though, is the wells do have a high arsenic content. And so there's been, I guess, that has to be taken into consideration when they are being run. And the wells need to be deleted and I guess run through the system so they can be run at the reasonable arsenic content, which I don't know exactly what that is off the top of my head. But that is something to consider when looking at these available flows, is that, I mean, those really the wells are used in emergency situations in serious drought conditions and stuff like that. And so one of the recommended improvements that we do mention in here is looking into potential new source developments. I know that there's one who works with a project that we're working on related to the wastewater project and everything. But it's something to keep in mind moving forward is source developments. Right. It gets reasonable and usable water sources, whether that be wells or something else. And then another one that I wanted to touch on was water storage. Again, on paper, everything looks good. We've got lots of storage. The city has lots of storage available, but again, we live in a very dry climate. That always, all those sources aren't always full, and so it makes it hard to kind of estimate and plan for what kind of water we're going to have. And so that is another recommendation that we would have, is to look into potential options for different storage, whether that be another reservoir or whatever it be, to help with the potential dry years or dry several years like we're kind of now.
That's right. So you just said we have plenty of storage, but in reality, you're saying for good years, we do need more storage. We could use more storage.
Right. I mean, on those good years, it would be nice to have, say another reservoir that we could, store a lot of during those good years that could be, say, for.
That's what I thought. That's what.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a lot of in my head
You're doing
trying to
great.
get it all out.
You're doing great.
But yeah, I guess I'll refer you back to this table right here. Storage capacity we have, or the city has 3,600 acre feet available, and that's in all the reservoirs, the storage tanks, and everything. And then if you look down here, the average beginning storage in all of the reservoirs and everything is just over 1,900. And so,
Have we ever hit our max storage? If we're considering adding more storage. I mean, our max storage was 2,458. That's the highest we've ever hit, right?
Right.
Storage one.
With
But we have storage capacity of 3,600.
yeah,
So this really is another reservoir going to help us. Just not getting enough water.
it could.
Well, that's a beginning storage, so that would be like April, correct, David?
Yeah.
So like kind of before the runoff starts. So we've had higher storage than that, because we've been clear full the whole system. That does happen.
Okay.
So I guess, yeah, just looking at maybe at a percentage wise, I mean, at a beginning storage, that percentage of the 3,600, another, say, reservoir would theoretically be that same percentage full in water.
So essentially, we hit 3,600, but then we used some in the highest storage that we started out with 2,400 because we utilized some of those.
Right.
I just didn't know if Eric knew to start doing more rain dancing.
It scared it.
And then one last thing that I just wanted to touch on is some of the recommended improvements for the current system. And again, I mentioned earlier that the 1,000 and 1,500 gallons per minute is kind of the standards that we like to see with the fire flow. You know, when we're up to go out and test the fire hydrant, you know, do a flow test. These are the types of flows that we ideally like to see. And in order to get up to those flows system-wide, these are the recommendations that we have, and we have prioritized them in this report. I don't know which page it's on. But if you'd like to see it more of like on a priority basis, we have included that. And so these pipes that we have right here, which they correlate to the maps in the packet, are some of the improvements that would need to be implemented to get the whole system up to the 1,000 gallons per minute threshold. And then these recommended improvements are to get the system, the entire system, up to the 1,500 gallon per minute threshold.
So your estimated cost, does that include the high, medium, and low priorities? Would that be everything, or is your cost breakdown just for high priority?
I believe that it was for. I don't remember off the top of my head. Like I said, there were several engineers that worked on this, and I can't remember. Do you remember? What's that? Do you remember what the cost breakdown?
It was for all of the projects. Yeah, and so just, now you got me talking, on the priority stuff, Javen and Jones of the Mail have prioritized kind of based on where the benefit will help us the most as far as level of service of fire flow. As we implement these into our planning, David Lyman and I, you know, it's entirely possible that we could do some low priority projects and a higher priority. We'll look at things like, say we're doing road reconstruction on a certain block, and it's been identified that we need a larger water line. Well, you know, that'll move a low priority to, you know, immediate priority because we're doing that work. And it makes a lot of sense. So there'll be some other factors that we as staff use implementing this plan that will change priorities a little bit. And so we'll see some of that. But now that we have the updated flow models and these deficiencies that we have, some of these deficiencies, I mean, we could have told these guys exactly where those deficiencies were, just because we're familiar with the system. Others, you know, that's what's great about the model and the expertise that Jones and the Mill has. They help us find some other areas that we're not necessarily aware of.
On the list of recommended improvements, when it has a line listed, the existing line is like, so for example, the P16, it's a 2-inch and it says to remove it. And then to add the new one, is that, so we're taking out, we would take out a 2-inch and add an 8?
Yeah.
And then the 2-inch line is longer than the 8-inch line would be, so we'd be saving something
Well,
like
you
that.
get better flow, it'd go from 2 up to 8.
But then the length of the line is different. So does that just,
Should be the same footage.
Yeah.
or maybe it's not the length of the line, what is that?
That could be to service more customers or something. I mean, there are several different scenarios that were considered with this. It's, I guess, hard to touch on every one of them, what exactly each scenario that was turned out from, I guess. But yeah. Are there any other questions?
So do you think one of the biggest deficiencies we have is that lack of flow that we need to improve on, getting it up to 1,500?
Yeah, that's one of the main concerns, especially in, you know, as the city experiences growth, that's definitely something that should be with the most urgent.
With this water project that's been talked about, what kind of flow do we have outside of the mapping that you've done?
Outside of like this city? That's a good question. I would have to look at the model and we could put different connections on the model.
Yeah, so for that specific project, we provided, Shell Licky with Brown and Caldwell, just what we call hydrant curve, showing what kind of flows, you know, where that anticipated connection is of the 600 west and 550 north, and that's 1,500 gallons a minute. And so they feel like that flow would work for them. They'll be able to design, you know, a pipe size that goes out in the west water. And with the square footage, you know, of homes that we have out there, you know, I'm sure they're targeting 1,000 gallons per minute because their design flow for that actual, you know, for the west water community. And that'll be more than sufficient for that square footage. Is that kind of what you're asking?
That was exactly what I was asking.
Yeah, so we can provide that fire flow out there.
Plus, looking at this water sources, where's the West Water Spring?
The west water spring is the spring right there, behind, you know, well, east of your hay barn. And
The city,
west of
does the city get water out of that spring?
No, we don't, we own the water right. We do not utilize that water in any way. And, you know, a lot of the old timers used to go out there like, and get water, you know, back when they.
That's where I'm gonna go when we have a catastrophe. I'm gonna go there.
That's fun. So we do own a little property right there, a small square that's surrounded by other private landowners, and we own that. The water rights, that's great.
So do you feel like conversations that we've had about growth and things, is all covered within here? I mean, if we talked about it, that we passed on to this plan as a
Yeah.
priority, do you feel like we're covered? pretty well?
Yeah, you know, so the curveball that we have with growth is just like every other city, you know. We've been steady on our growth. I always say 0.7. Apparently the governor's office says 0.66. That probably rounds up. But even if you look at like our load growth in our electric utility, it's that same rate. You know, it just follows right along with the population growth. But, you know, land's pretty awesome. You know, like we only hide so long, and one of these days our growth rate, you know, might be 1.4. It could be double what we're seeing, you know, and then the water resource that we have, the excess capacity, is going to go away pretty quick, you know, as the growth curve steepens. And so, you know, that's what we want to do here with all of us is keep our eye on that, make sure we're planning ahead. You know, we don't want that growth curve to start getting steeper and we're all doing something else, and then all of a sudden we're at panic.
So if I can add to that, that's one of the main reasons why the UDOT did the TPA grant. I wanted to pursue that so we can update our general plan so that we can better guide the growth. Because having worked for high growth communities before, what happens is get a developer that comes in, they've got all the water rights and they're willing to pay to extend all the infrastructure. And it makes it hard for the council to say no or to guide that growth if you don't have things in place to direct how that growth is supposed to work. And so that's what will help us so that if we are, you know, confronted, which could be positive and negative, if we are confronted with a developer that wants to come in and, you know, put in 40 homes on the north end, the general plan and updating that will help better guide us.
Might be jumping the gun, but do we have a plan idea about how to go about financing a project like this?
Yeah, so Councilmember Ewald, as you get a little more into it, we have what we call capital improvement plan. And so we will take these projects, start building those into that capital improvement plan. And then I don't want to say we make a guess, but we kind of, you know, we look at, you know, this project is going to be X number of dollars. What are our funding options for it, whether it's CIB or USDA rural development or, you know, general obligation bonds or whatever. And so we plan for that. And that's a process that we go through as, with Public Works Department, with Finance Department, City Manager, and then you'll see that CIP come through and we try and get that updated, and keep that going. Water projects, just a little bit of history. We did our first water master plan, over 10 years ago, or about 10 years ago. And we had some real needs. We couldn't get water from the water tanks down to town. And so we added a new water line all the way to Councilmember Bauer's house. And then even before we got all the way that far, we enlarged it more in order to get the fire flow down. And it was really good timing because a lot of grant money was available, 10 years ago. And so that's why we're not finding a ton of big projects. There's no big red flag. And it's because we have been planning, we have been able to find money to do the projects that we need to do. Really, our water system is looking pretty good. We had Jones DeMille look quite a bit at chlorine residual throughout our system. That's one of the things that we want to do to make sure we're providing safe drinking water to all of our customers. When it gets all the way to the airport, we still want a little bit of chlorine in it. Some people live kind of on a dead end road. So we want to make sure that we have enough chlorine in our water that if something were to happen, that water is still safe for drinking. And so you might notice as you go through that report, there's quite a little bit of language, and we looked into that with the model on chlorine contact time. I'm sure there's some other scopes of work that I'm not thinking about, but the hydraulic model now, the state requires that I don't know that they actually require that we have one on a community as small as 3,700, but it helps us with new development like a wastewater project or a Meadowlark subdivision. We take a look at the model real quick, see what it takes to serve, that many Warrensburg homes, and make sure that a developer's putting in the right size water mains and those things. It's a really good tool. And the state obviously believes that because they're more than happy to fund water master plan. Grant money, so.
Another question I have, Terry, is the arsenic in the wells. Which one of the three produces the most? Are they all equal?
I have a spreadsheet we can pull up if you wanted to get super nerdy into it. So let's just talk a little bit about arsenic so all the council understands that we have a lot of new faces here. The EPA maximum contaminant level is 10 parts per billion. A lot of those MCLs are just a hard do not exceed. With arsenic, that's not the case. With arsenic, it's on a 12-month annual running average. So David Lyman and I have a spreadsheet, and we track that. And when we pump wells, so we sample arsenic at 2 locations, the closest to where well water comes into our system, and we do that every month, whether we're running the wells or not. So we have that baseline, because all water has a little bit of arsenic or can. And so we're keeping track of that annual running average. And then when we do use the wells, we can have I think the highest we've ever seen is 16 parts per billion. A lot of times it's below 10 with the well water, but it just kind of varies randomly almost, it feels like. And so we just watch that average. So if we get in a really bad drought situation where we're relying heavily on the wells, we could get in a situation where we need to terminate use of the well because we're going to exceed the 12-month annual running average, and we cannot do that. So we have a blending permit from the state that allows us to run the system the way that we're running it. Our other option would be if we had this need where we had to run the wells 12 months, year round, we would need to do arsenic removal,
So that would be at each well, correct?
Yeah, presumably we could do one on the south end and treat the water out of both well B and C, simultaneously, and then, but well A would have to be separate. We're talking, well over $500,000 for an arsenic removal plant, and then, O&M, property acquisition, our well pumps are sized to move the water from B to C all the way up to the youth detention center, and then we'd kind of be oversized on our pumps because we wouldn't take the water as far if we treated it, down, around the world, where we could put the arsenic removal plant, on property we have there by the detention center. We have a lot of options, but arsenic is just something we have to watch and deal with. And it's a natural found element in the water coming out of the Navajo sandstone formations.
I have two questions. Based off of previous, I guess, plans, how long are these numbers typically good for? I mean, I know that it changes and it's probably going to be different tomorrow, but
The cost estimate.
the cost estimates, yeah.
Yeah, those are, and I think that we did put,
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, do you see that it's like, I know that it's worse now.
recently, yeah, I mean, the last year, like we've seen, just the randomest things, like more than double.
Right.
And so it really is hard to say how long. 2 years ago, we could give you, yeah, it's gonna increase this much every year. Now it's so hard to estimate. As far as cost goes.
And then if I understand this right, is it two different cost estimates? So it's one to get to the 1,000, then in addition to that, to get to the 1,500.
Not in addition to.
So it's separate?
Yeah, they're separate, and
So we're not talking a total of both of them combined.
Right. And as Terry mentioned, it'll kind of just depend on what's on our capital improvements list and how you decide to prioritize those.
So cost estimating is always one of the biggest challenges, and the work these guys do help us. When we put a project, let's say we put it on the capital plan, and we're planning a project right now for 2032, say it's 10 years out. We would do a little bit of work and put some effort into come up with a better, more realistic price. And then as that moves closer, let's say it's 5 years out, then we'd start spending a little bit of time and really try to get that number. What the worst than go to the funding agency, getting a project funded, design it, bid it out, and we don't have the money. And so we keep fine tuning those cost estimates as we get closer to the project happening.
Any other questions for anybody here about the water master?
My office is part of your services or not, but do you have a recommendation on whether the city should consider another well or another water source or storage? Which would be priority?
Probably, well, that wouldn't seem to be as far as, sort of development, that seems to be most practical for.
Can't tap into that springs that Eric's got?
Yeah, so it's pretty tough. A spring is always influenced by, any pollution near the surface. And so to just capture that and put it into our water system and minimum that's just that. It's well below our water treatment plant, so there'd be quite a bit of energy cost to get it back up there to treat it. So.
And we do have a short statement there about the well that is associated with that wastewater project as well. And so depending on what that produces, it could be to that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I guess with that, we were just kind of looking to formally adopt the water master plan as a planning document that we use to continue improving our water system. And so we put a resolution together to that effect. And I guess that's our recommendation. We adopt that.
If there's no other questions, I would accept the motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 7-12-2022-4, the culinary water master plan.
Okay, that's a motion by Councilmember Bowers, and seconded by Councilmember Nelson on the resolution 7-12-2022-4, the water master plan update. Any questions on the motion? If there's none, I would all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, everyone's motion. I am not aware of the need for a closed session, so we'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second. All right.
motion to adjourn by Councilmember Grover and Councilmember Noel, all in favor?
Aye.
That is everyone.